the Second and Third Anglo-Powhatan Wars. In an earlier video, we explored the First Anglo-Powhatan War and the infamous Jamestown Massacre. This video serves as a continuation, delving into the Second and Third Anglo-Powhatan Wars. If you haven't seen the first part, we highly recommend watching it to better understand the context. The aftermath of the Jamestown Massacre, the aftermath of the Powhatan attack on Jamestown, was devastating. Over 300 colonists, nearly one-third of the settlement's population, were killed. This brutal assault ushered in a decade-long conflict, known as the Second Anglo-Powhatan War, which fundamentally altered the dynamics between the native Powhatan tribes and the English colonists. For the struggling Virginia colony, the attack delivered a crippling blow. Not only had the colony failed to yield profits for its investors, but it had also been unable to protect its settlers, including indentured servants, from such a catastrophic loss of life. The Second Anglo-Powhatan War. In the immediate aftermath of the attack on March 22, 1622, the English abandoned their more vulnerable settlements, retreating to Jamestown and other relatively secure locations to regroup. Governor Wyatt himself sought refuge on the eastern shore for 6 weeks during the summer of 1622. Rather than launching an immediate counterattack, the English initially focused on forging alliances with distant tribes along the Potomac River and the eastern shore. These strategic partnerships were intended to strengthen their position while they devised a long-term plan to retaliate against the Powhatans. By the fall and early winter of 1622 to 1623, the English had begun targeting the most exposed Powhatan villages, initiating a campaign of destruction that led to a prolonged guerrilla war. The Powhatans' intimate knowledge of the terrain gave them a tactical advantage. They struck swiftly and vanished into the landscape, while their bows and arrows often outperformed the English muskets. In 1623, the two sides convened for a supposed peace negotiation. However, the English betrayed the Powhatans, poisoning their drinks and massacring the attending delegation. Capitalizing on the surprise, they proceeded to burn several Powhatan villages, killing any natives they encountered. By 1624, tensions culminated in a decisive battle. Despite assembling 800 bowmen against just 60 Englishmen, the Powhatans were unable to hold their ground after the English successfully destroyed their cornfields. The disparity in firepower proved decisive. While the Powhatans suffered heavy losses, only 16 English soldiers were wounded. A fragile peace was declared in 1628, but conflict reignited in March 1629 and persisted until a final truce was reached in 1632. By this time, the English had begun expanding their settlements on both sides of the James River, the eastern shore and the southern York. Peace and the Third Anglo-Powhatan War to secure their settlements and minimize further confrontations. The English constructed a palisade in 1634, a fortified wooden wall stretching 6 miles across the Virginia Peninsula. This defensive measure marked the beginning of a new era of colonial expansion and domination over the region, effectively confining the Powhatans to smaller, isolated territories. The Third Anglo-Powhatan War and its aftermath. By 1644, the balance of power had shifted dramatically, with the English colonists now outnumbering the remaining native Powhatans in the region. Despite being 90 years old, Chief Powhatan launched one final desperate effort to reclaim native lands. On April 18, 1644, the Powhatans mustered every warrior they could and broke through the English palisade, executing a brutal surprise raid that killed between 400 and 500 colonists. This attack marked the beginning of the Third Anglo-Powhatan War. The timing of the assault was reminiscent of the Powhatans' devastating strike in the spring of 1622. Choosing to attack when English food stores were depleted after winter forced the colonists into a precarious position. The Powhatans aimed to create hunger among the settlers by destroying ripening cornfields just before harvest. However, launching an attack in April also minimized their own vulnerability, as their warriors remained dispersed on seasonal hunting expeditions and were less exposed to English retaliation. This calculated timing may have also reflected Powhatan's acute awareness of the English Civil War unfolding across the Atlantic, which could weaken colonial reinforcements. Knowing his own life was nearing its end, He likely saw this as his final chance to either expel the colonists or force them to curtail their relentless territorial expansion. Furthermore, younger warriors within the Powhatan Confederacy, eager to prove their status as leaders and fighters, may have advocated for the attack. Despite the initial success, the Powhatans made no significant follow-up to their April assault. By February 1645, the English had ordered the construction of 3 frontier forts: Fort Charles at the falls of the James River, Fort James on the Chickahominy River, and Fort Royal at the falls of the York River. By July, English forces, bolstered by alliances with the Rappahannock and Accomack tribes, launched retaliatory strikes against Powhatan villages. These raids stripped the Powhatans of resources and culminated in a decisive attack in August on Opechancanough stronghold, where the chief and many of his followers were captured. Opechancanough was transported to Jamestown, where he was ultimately shot and killed in 1646. That same year, the colony constructed a 4th defensive outpost, Fort Henry, at the site of modern-day Petersburg. Opechancanoug's death effectively ended the Third Anglo-Powhatan War, leading to the formalization of peace with the signing of the Treaty of 1646. The Treaty of 1646, the end of the Powhatan Confederacy. The Treaty of 1646 was a pivotal moment that formalized the collapse of the Powhatan Confederacy, marking a significant shift in the balance of power between the English colonists and the native populations of Virginia. This agreement forced the Powhatans to relinquish nearly all of their ancestral lands, confining them to a designated area north of the York River. This marked not only the physical displacement of the Powhatans, but also the symbolic end of their sovereignty and influence in the region. The English now controlled vast expanses of fertile land, paving the way for unrestrained colonial expansion. Under the terms of the treaty, the Confederacy's new leader, Necatowance, was reduced to a figurehead. Though he carried the title of chief, the role was largely ceremonial, as the Powhatan Confederacy was no longer the unified and formidable alliance it once had been. Decades of conflict, epidemics, and displacement had ravaged their population. Once a thriving and cohesive society, the Powhatans had dwindled to a shadow of their former strength. Diseases brought by European settlers, combined with years of warfare and the enslavement of captured natives who were sold to the West Indies, left the Confederacy fractured and vulnerable. Entire villages had been wiped out, and survivors were scattered, often fleeing their homelands to join other tribes in distant territories. The treaty also reflected the English strategy of systematically dismantling native resistance. By confining the Powhatans to a restricted area and asserting dominance over their lands, the colonists ensured that any future uprisings would lack the resources and cohesion necessary to pose a significant threat. The palisade, constructed earlier in 1634 as a fortified barrier between English settlements and Powhatan territories, became a clear marker of the growing divide between the two worlds. What had once been a contested frontier was now firmly under English control. Necatowance's successor, Toto Potamoy, inherited a fragmented and diminished leadership. By the time he rose to power, the Confederacy had been reduced to governing only 2 tribes, a stark contrast to the expansive coalition of tribes that had once defined Powhatan power. Toto Potamoy's leadership was marked by struggles to maintain even this small remnant of the Confederacy's former glory. His successor and wife, Kakakoesk, faced even greater challenges, as she ultimately became the sole leader of the Pamunkey tribe, one of the few remaining Powhatan groups. Her efforts to preserve her people's heritage and autonomy highlight the resilience of native communities, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. The dissolution of the Powhatan Confederacy was more than just a political defeat. It was the culmination of decades of resistance against encroaching colonial forces. The Powhatans had fought valiantly to defend their lands and way of life, but the relentless expansion of the English, combined with the devastating impacts of disease and internal fractures, proved insurmountable. The Treaty of 1646 solidified English dominance in the region and marked the beginning of a new chapter in Virginia's history, a chapter in which the native presence was increasingly marginalized. Although the Powhatan Confederacy faded from prominence, the legacy of its people endures. Their struggle against colonization, their contributions to the cultural fabric of early America, and their resilience in the face of near annihilation remain powerful reminders of the complexities of colonial history. The Treaty of 1646 may have marked the end of an era, but it also serves as a testament to the enduring spirit of the Powhatan people and their determination to survive against all odds. This watershed moment was not merely the conclusion of a series of conflicts, but a turning point that set the stage for centuries of colonial expansion, altering the cultural and political landscape of what would become the United States. Thank you for watching the video until the end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any new videos from us. What do you think about today's topic? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found the video helpful, feel free to share it with your friends and family. We hope you had a great time. See you in the next video with even more exciting content. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out.